The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news at 6 comes to you with the compliments of Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC. With the news at this time, I'm Dennis Chabrol. Good evening. First, the highlights. The leader of the People's National Congress Reform is not opposed to meeting the Private Sector Commission as he calls for broader representation by that body. Also in the local scene, we tell you this hour that the Health Minister, Dr. Frank Anthony, says the decline in COVID cases on record may not be a true reflection of actual cases in Guyana. A laborer was struck down and killed in a rice mill compound in West Coast Berbice today. In the Caribbean, the Antigua and Barbuda government makes a compassionate payment to former LIAT workers. And internationally, the Guatemalan president has called for a curfew in an area where members of an indigenous community attacked a rival village due to land dispute. The details of these and other stories in a moment.
Hit to standing lines? Don't worry. KFC has got you covered with their drive-thrus, which are open now from 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. at Movietown, Vlissingen Road, Mandela Avenue, Reading Hoop, Parika, and the Amazonia Mall. That's right, you can drive through at 6 of their 9 locations. Remember, their current opening hours are 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. Go on down and let your taste buds savor the spices today. KFC.
It's finger-licking good.
And now the news in detail. The People's National Congress Reform PNCR leader says he's unopposed to meeting with the Private Sector Commission PSC. Mr. Aubrey Norton says the PNCR has always embraced the private sector and will continue to do so.
We believe in the private sector. There's a role for the private sector. I believe I will meet with the PSC, but when I meet with the PSC, we will discuss the situation and see where we go from there. I believe a political party should be in contact with all civil society. For instance, I've already begun to engage the religious community and a number of other bodies. I've been speaking to people in the trade union movement.
The PNCR leader says many requests have been made of him to engage a private sector commission with a view to broadening its representation, which currently excludes many businesses. He says he's critical of the stance of the PSC being politically affiliated. He wants to see broad-based representation.
Many of them believe that the private sector commission does not reflect their interests, and it tends to operate more on a political partisan basis. As a party, we will struggle for a private sector that is genuinely a private sector and not a commission that reflects narrow interests. And I want it to be made clear, we are not anti-private sector. In fact, we believe the private sector should act as civil society, independent, pursuing the interests of the private sector. We conclude a lot of times the commission doesn't do that, and therefore we need to have in place a private sector that reflects all ethnicities in this country and all businesses.
The PNCR leader says his party will strongly represent Guyanese and Guyanese businesses. Dr. Richard Van West Charles and Vol Lawrence have been appointed as advisors to the People's National Congress Reform. Leader of the PNCR, Aubrey Norton, announced this following the official declaration and installation of the party's leadership today. He says this is part of his approach to inclusive governance.
I will have discussions with these candidates, and there will be a role for them in the People's National Congress Reform once they agree. I've said that I've already begun to talk to Comrade Van West Charles, and I intend to speak with Comrade Harmon, and we will work the way forward. The only thing I can promise you is that anyone who wants to contribute to this party will be allowed to do so, whether they competed against me or not.
Mr. Norton also remarks that he'll be consulting with former Chairman Vola Lawrence to accept an appointment.
But I want to give an especial thank you to the chairman of the party, Comrade Vola Lawrence, who managed excellently a period I would call the period of uncertainty. You surely brought certainty to it and give direction. As you all are aware, Comrade Lawrence indicated that she was not going to compete for any position on the executive, but may I also state that the second advisor to the party, and not necessarily in that order, will be Comrade Vola Lawrence.
He says key among those objectives is holding the governing People's Progressive Party and ultimately taking back the reins of government. The new leader of the People's National Congress Reform, Mr. Norton, has hinted that changes in the parliamentary opposition in the National Assembly. Speaking to News Talk Radio 103.1 FM following the official announcement of Mr. Norton taking over the reins of the PNCR, he said there is likely to be some changes at Parliament which may involve the opposition leader being replaced. Mr. Norton says, while not the priority, the executives of the party will decide.
The question of what steps will be taken will be discussed with the executive, and then based on the decisions of the executive, we'll move forward. I could say to you, however, is that one thing that is evident is that the party comrades who would have elected me seem to have suggested by the mandate that there is need for change at the parliamentary level.
Opposition leader Joseph Harman had said during the party internal campaign that the leader of the party and the opposition leader should be the one person following traditions of former leaders of the PNCR. Mr. Harman, after conceding to Mr. Norton, is now saying that he'll remain opposition leader while his status in the party will be an ordinary member. Mr. Norton declined to comment on Mr. Harman's latest position, but will only say that the party will discuss and decide the way forward. Mr. Joseph Harman on Sunday said he'll remain Guyana's opposition leader, although he was defeated by Aubrey Norton for the post of leader of the People's National Congress Reform, which controls the opposition coalition. He knows that he'll remain as an ordinary member of the PNCR, but will still be leader of the opposition, a national constitutional office. Former PNCR leader David Granger, who is chairman of the PNCR-led Partnership for National Unity, is legally the representative of the list of candidates for the coalition of APNU Alliance for Change, and so he enjoys the power of recall and replacement of parliamentarians. In the weeks running up to Saturday's election, Mr. Harman had pointed to the trend in which the PNCR leader is the opposition leader and had said that had been his goal. For his part, Mr. Norton had not committed himself on the topic when he had been quizzed about whether he'll seek the replacement of Mr. Harman as opposition leader. Instead, Mr. Norton had indicated that that would be a matter for the party to decide. Thousands of commuters along the East Bank corridor are expected to breathe a sigh of relief with the opening this morning of the Mucka to Little Diamond Road. President Jervin Ali this morning officially commissioned the road. Speaking at the event, he said that cameras have been installed to detect speeding motorists, and the law will soon be amended to send tickets to errant motorists.
We have designed a safe road usage plan. And in that plan along this road, we envision 3 police outposts. 3 police outposts. 2 of those outposts are already in place. The next phase, which will be very soon, is to connect cameras to those outposts. And you know we're testing right now with the cameras speeding. And I'm very happy to inform you that the cameras can even pick up if you have your seatbelt on. So there are some amendments that will be made to the law to allow for electronic ticketing.
The president is also warning motorists against racing on the Mucka to Little Diamond Road. He also says that heavy-duty vehicles will not be allowed on that thoroughfare.
This road is designed for a specific category of vehicle, and that is small vehicle SUVs. The big trucks, you will see barriers. If you think it is your responsibility to take down the barriers because you want to break the law, there will be consequences, and you will face the consequences. So all of us in this society, we have to start to learn that we all have a responsibility. And our responsibility is not only to build, but to take care of what we build.
The president also says that a jogging path may soon be constructed along the roadway as part of the government's vision for health and wellness. The health ministry says it continues to see a decline in active cases, but is vigilant against a surge. During his COVID update on Monday, Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony said more than 15 new cases were recorded.
Over the last 24 hours, we would have recorded 21 new cases. And right now, across the country, we have 818 active cases. In all the regions, we have active cases, but right now in Region 4, there are about 390 active cases across the region. That is followed by Region 6 with 189 cases and Region 3 with 95 cases. So these are predominantly the areas where we have active cases.
Dr. Anthony says of those hospitalized, 26 persons are currently sickened by the virus.
As of yesterday, we've had 38 persons in hospital. Of the 38, 31 of them are at the Ocean View Hospital, with 11 persons in the ICU. Of the 38 that are in hospital, we have 26 persons who require oxygen, so they have a more severe form of COVID.
The health minister says the ministry has administered 408,838 first doses of COVID vaccines to adults 18 years and older, and 290,688 are fully jabbed. Children 12 to 17 years old, partially vaccinated, total 30,028, and 21,309 of the same age group are fully vaccinated. The minister says there are 9,156 persons who have received a booster shot. The health minister, Dr. Frank Anthony, says the decline in COVID cases on record may not be a true reflection of actual cases in Guyana. The health minister is urging caution as he discloses that a drop in the number of persons being tested COVID-19 may be a factor for low numbers.
One, we have seen that across the board, not a lot of people are coming to get tested. And therefore, it might give us a sense that we have a decrease in cases, whereas if there's a drop in testing, then we wouldn't accurately be able to see what is happening with the pandemic across the country.
Dr. Frank Anthony has renewed his call for persons to get tested at any of the more than 100 established testing sites.
Those persons who believe they might have been exposed to COVID, we're asking them to go and get tested. We have testing sites in every region of the country. All our regional hospitals are equipped to do testing, so if you believe that you have been exposed to someone with COVID, we're encouraging you to go get tested. It's the responsible thing to do, because if you test positive, then you're required to isolate so that you don't continue that chain of spreading the disease.
There are now 818 active COVID-19 cases recorded across Guyana. 390 of those are in Region 4, Damarara Mahaica, with the remaining spread across the other regions. A laborer was today knocked down and killed by a vehicle at Hack's Rice Mill Compound, Golden Grove, West Coast, Berbice. Police say that at about 11:30 this morning, 18-year-old Tularam Harry of 855 Bath Settlement, West Coast, Berbice, was killed. He was struck by a motor lorry with trailer that was being driven by 24-year-old Hassad Baksh, also known as Black Boy, of 15 Section A, the Edward Village, West Coast, Berbice. Police say that Mr. Baksh was reversing the lorry with a container into the boiler area for the container to be loaded with bulk rice when a laborer alerted him to stop. The driver told investigators that he immediately stopped, exited the lorry, and went to the back of the vehicle, where he saw Harry lying on the ground motionless. The body was picked up and taken to Fort Wellington Public Hospital, where he was pronounced dead by a doctor on duty. In the Caribbean, the government of Antigua and Barbuda today dispatched 2 million Eastern Caribbean dollars to the Liat court-appointed receiver for distribution to resident former Liat workers. The Antigua newsroom reports that the sum is intended to meet partial satisfaction of the cash component of the compassionate payout, which the Antigua and Barbuda government has volunteered. The government extends the compassionate offer through the government, though the government has no legal obligation to make any such payments. The Antigua newsroom says the payment by the government of Antigua and Barbuda is intended to bring some Christmas cheer to those who have been unable to earn incomes since they have been severed from the airline. Trinidad and Tobago's Secretary of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, Dr. Faith Israel, has described the COVID-19 mandate for public sector workers starting mid-January as a continued trend by the central government to shame the population. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley made the announcement on Saturday as he cited rising COVID-19 figures, hospitalizations and deaths. He said the negative effect of the health sector and economy required intervention. Dr. Rowley says workers, including those in the Tobago House of Assembly who do not comply, will not be paid their salaries. Prime Minister Rowley says exemptions will only be made for people who have medical reasons for not being vaccinated. Dr. B.Y. Israel says it's never easy to say goodbye to someone who they love. Less than a week into the winter tourist season, Jamaica is reporting visitor arrivals, it says, compare favorably with the pre-coronavirus COVID-19 era. Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett says since December 17, there has been an increase in flight arrivals. He says Saturday's 9,153 arrivals from 62 flights is the biggest single record for Jamaica since the airports were reopened in June 15 last year. A statement released by the Ministry of Tourism noted that over the past 3 days, an estimated 25,000 passengers passed through the Sangster International Airport in Montego Bay, figures not realized since 2019. The tourism minister says that barring any fallout from the Omicron variant of the virus, there is every reason to believe that Jamaica will record increased visitor arrivals. Mr. Edmund Bartlett says that in meeting with international partners in some of Jamaica's main source markets, interest in the island remains very high, as Jamaica continues to be a first-rate and a first-choice destination. Meanwhile, Chief Strategist, Senior Advisor in the Ministry of Tourism, Delano Seavright, said that Jamaica's cruise numbers will see an exponential increase in early 2022 when the Western Caribbean route is fully opened. And we now go to the BBC World Service for the latest in international news.
Hello, this is Danielle Yawowiecka with the BBC News. Rebel Tigrayan forces fighting the Ethiopian government say they have withdrawn from neighbouring regions and have expressed hope that the move can lead to a ceasefire. But the rebels' version of events has been questioned, as our regional Africa editor Will Ross explains.
The Ethiopian military says the Tigrayan troops didn't withdraw from the Amhara and Afar regions but were forced back. A TPLF spokesman admitted its fighters had come under pressure, especially from drone attacks. Getachew Radar said Ethiopian and Eritrean soldiers had been amassing near the border with Tigray and warned of a further escalation of the conflict. He urged the international community to persuade the government and its backers to pursue a political solution. Supporters of the government may see this as a call for help, but with 9 million people needing food aid and the country tearing itself apart, this could be an opportunity to end the war.
Switzerland and Ireland have introduced new COVID restrictions as the Omicron variant spreads through Europe. The Netherlands has had its first working day under strict lockdown. France has cancelled end-of-year festivities in Paris to prevent large groups of people from gathering. The director of the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control, Dr. Andrea Ammon, says stricter measures to limit contact would have to be introduced.
The extent of the measures is, of course, to be decided according to the local situation. But in principle, besides now intensifying the rollout of the vaccinations and the boosters, the only way to bring down the current high case numbers is to reduce the contact rates. And there are different ways to do it.
The Chilean currency, the peso, has fallen by 4% to a record low against the dollar following the victory of the left-wing candidate Gabriel Boric in Sunday's presidential election. Mr. Boric won 56% of the vote, beating the far-right candidate José Antonio Cast. Leonardo Rocha reports on how it's impacting Chile's financial markets.
Stock markets fell by 10% on Monday in Santiago, with mining stocks performing particularly bad. Chile is the world's biggest copper producer and it exports vast amounts of other minerals, including silver, gold and lithium. During his campaign, Mr. Boric promised to reform the country's economic system and introduce measures to reduce inequality. He intends to scrap the country's private pension system, raise taxes and ban mining projects that destroy the environment.
The Guatemalan president, Alejandro Yamatei, has called on the government to impose a curfew in an area where members of an indigenous community attacked a rival village this weekend, killing 13 people. Mr. Yamatei said the measure was aimed at restoring order and preventing further violence. The unrest is part of a land dispute dating back a century. You're listening to the World News from the BBC. Prosecutors in the United States have made their closing arguments at the sex trafficking trial of the British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell. They described her as a sophisticated predator who not only knew about the sexual abuse committed by the late paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, but willingly took part in his sex trafficking schemes. Here's Barbara Platt-Usher.
The prosecution emphasized that Ghislaine Maxwell was a person of power in Jeffrey Epstein's household. They said she was the master of the house, she ran his properties, she was intimately aware of what went on in them, and she was involved in this aspect of them. The defense we've been hearing is again repeating the argument that Ms. Maxwell is a scapegoat for Jeffrey Epstein, and then she went on to again undermine the testimony and credibility of the four accusers, which has been a very big part of the case.
Russian planes are reported to have launched airstrikes on suspected IS group hideouts in eastern Syria. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the strikes follow a string of jihadist attacks recently. At the beginning of this month, the militants attacked workers in the Karata oil field, reportedly killing at least 10. The Saudi-led coalition is reported to have instructed all civilians, including international aid agency workers in Yemen, to immediately evacuate Sana'a airport in the north of the country. Saudi media quoted a spokesman as saying the coalition forces were carrying out airstrikes on what he called legitimate military targets. Sana'a, Yemen's capital, has been under the control of Iran-backed Houthi rebels for 7 years. A female soldier has been arrested in Nigeria for accepting a marriage proposal while on duty. A video emerged last week of the soldier accepting a ring from a man kneeling in front of her as well-wishers looked on. An army spokesman said she'd breached the military's code of conduct by indulging in romance while in uniform. That's the latest BBC News.
That's the news to the moment.
KFC delivery is now available from the Amazonia location. For shore-based Little Diamond residents, call 6320533, 6320533, 6080-162, 6080-162, or 503-3591, 503-3591. That's KFC's delivery service from the Amazonia location. KFC.
It's finger-licking good.
Now to end the news, a recap of the highlights. The leader of the People's National Congress Reform is not opposed to meeting the Private Sector Commission, as he calls for broader representation at the Commission. Mr. Joseph Harmon Vola Lawrence, I beg your pardon, Vola Lawrence and Vanvas Charles have been appointed advisors under the new leadership of the People's National Congress Reform. The newly elected leader of the PNC is hinting at changes to the parliamentary opposition. The Health Minister, Dr. Frank Anthony, says the decline in COVID cases on record may not be a true reflection of actual cases in Guyana. The Antigua and Barbuda government makes a compassionate payment to formerly at workers. And internationally, the Guatemalan president has called for a curfew in an area where members of an indigenous community attacked a rival village due to a land dispute. That's the end of the news, which came to you with the compliments of Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.
Giftland Mall, they're giving away vouchers from December 30 to Christmas Eve. You can say there's no such thing as Santa, but as for we on 103, we believe.
From December 13 to 24, listen to News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM.
Answer a simple question and you can win yourself a voucher. Compliments of Giftland Mall.
Season's greetings to supporters of Giftland
and 103.1 FM.